Hello and welcome to the end of the year book tag. Alright, I have a list of questions that I wrote down here in my handy dandy notebook. I got these questions from Destiny. Her 2023 book tag consisted of a lot of these questions, and then I actually just watched Larry's video where she did these questions as well. I think she changed up a little bit and then I changed them up a little bit. So we got some different questions in here. I don't exactly know what the original end of year book tag questions are. This tag has been changed for a lot of people, but just know I took inspiration from those two creators. Of all these different questions that I answered, I put a book with each of them or multiple books, and then at the end of this video I'm going to get into my reflection on my 2024 reading, and then we're going to get into 2025 reading goals, so stay tuned for that. But first up, kicking it off, I'm going to talk about my most favorite read of 2024. Now, as I'm filming this, it is December 6th. We have almost a whole month left of this year. I could read a book that could be my favorite book of all time, but unfortunately I needed another video idea for bookmas, so I'm not waiting until the end of the year to actually film this tag. We're gonna do it now. If you've been watching my channel this year, you probably can guess what my favorite read of this year was. I have a duology, but the first book is my pride and joy, and that book is Six Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim, and then we have our follow-up to the duology, which is The Dragon's Promise. If you don't know the story about how these books came into my life, I did a video where I went on a blind date with a book back in February because I wasn't about to be going on a date in my real life, so I figured I'd do it with the book, you know? I went to my local Barnes and they had a display of blind date with books, and I picked out one that said dragons on it. It had Asian author. I don't know what else was written on there, but I saw dragons and I was down. So then I get back home, I unwrap this book, and I realize that it's the second book in a duology. And it's not like an interconnected standalone thing. This is a fantasy, so the story is following itself. So they wrapped the second book in a duology, which doesn't make sense to me, but I was like, okay, whatever. So then I'm like, I have to film this video. I want to start reading a book for this video. And they didn't have Six Crimson Cranes in stock at my local Target, so I ended up just ordering it on Amazon, and it came the next day. And it just so happened to be a book that I absolutely fell in love with. Cannot recommend that book enough. It was just everything that I wanted. The journey it took me on was the best thing of all time. And this was the first book that I read by Elizabeth Lim and was perfect. If you like Studio Ghibli or anything like that, I think this book would be for you. I could talk about this book for a long time. I already want to reread it, but that is my favorite book of 2024, and I'm pretty sure that it will be by the end of the year as well. Moving on to question number 2, on a little sadder note, we have my most disappointing read of the year. I'm going to go with The Long Game by Elena Armas for this one. I read The American Roommate Experiment by this author, and I absolutely love that. It comes after The Spanish Love Deception. Those are interconnected standalones. So The Long Game was going to be another start to an interconnected standalone duology or trilogy or whatever. And I was excited because I really loved The American Roommate Experiment. So this book came out, I picked it up, and I DNF'd this around, I want to say like the 30 or 40% mark. I did not vibe with the writing at all. There were so many things that were happening that I just found myself nitpicking because they didn't make sense to me as to why they were happening. It was super cringy for an adult novel. It wasn't for me at all. I'm very sad about it. Now we have a book that I think needs to be more popular. I'm gonna say Nocticadia by Carrie Lake for this one. There are a lot of people that are talking about this the more that time goes on, but I still feel like it should be talked about more than it is. This is a dark academia gothic romance story, and it's absolutely fantastic. The writing in this was so atmospheric. The vibes were great. I love the main character. She was awesome. I was nervous for the romance because it is professor student, but it turned out to be completely okay, and I didn't mind it at all. I love the story. It was very creepy, very eerie, a little gross and disturbing. All around, just a great read. I really loved it. Even though this book is getting more popular, I still think it needs to be more popular than it is. Now we have an overhyped book that I read. This is a book that I didn't necessarily like that so many other people love, and this is Wild Love by Elsie Silver. So one, I will say that I love the Chestnut Spring series, which Hopeless I read this year. That's the last book in the Chestnut Spring series. I was also going to say that book for this question, but I decided not to, just because that's the end of a series and Wild Love is the beginning of a series, so I was expecting a lot from this. I don't know, I didn't like the romance at all in Wild Love. There were certain things that the male main character did, something he had or kept over all these years when him and the female main character didn't even really talk, and it just weirded me out a lot. I'm like, if that happened to me in real life, I would think that dude is a little creepy. So I just wasn't connecting with the romance in this one. That's pretty much it. I loved the Chestnut Spring series, so I was really expecting to love this one, but it didn't really work for me. I am going to continue this series into the next year. I read the second book, and that was okay. I know it's only a 4-book series, so I will read the next two. Hopefully I find at least one that I really like, but as of right now, I'm just not feeling this series. Now we have a book that surprised me. I have two for this one. The first one is Wayward by Amelia Hart. I'm saying this because it is a debut novel by this author, and I thought it was so fantastically written. It's told in 3 different timelines with 3 different point of views, and the way that she was able to connect them all was done so well. And I fell in love with that book. It was a 5-star read for me. One of my favorite books of the year. It's witchy, so it's super fun. It's not that I wasn't expecting to like it, but I definitely wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did, and I didn't expect it to hit me the way that it did. And the other one I have is Binding 13, which is book 1 in the Boys of Common series. This was a book that I was going into. A lot of people love this series. Some people hate this series, and I didn't know what side I was going to fall on, so I wanted to see for myself, and I ended up really liking this book. I grew a really strong connection to these characters. The plotline and the writing is definitely something that I would not like if I didn't like the characters. I think going into the series, you need to have a strong connection with the characters or you're not going to like it. It's going to feel really rough to get through because these books are long. The scenes are long. That's why I'm saying if you're not connected, I think it's going to be a rough read. But I didn't feel that. I really strongly felt a lot for these characters, and I'm excited to continue this series. Don't mind me. I'm just going to get comfy and chill back here. We're just going to have a chill chat. Next question is, who were my favorite book couples? And this is actually fantastic because 2 of the couples are from the same author, Julie Soto. I have Forget Me Not and Not Another Love Song. I love these books. Forget Me Not, I gave 5 stars. I really connected to these characters and their relationship and how they view relationships. And I think they're really good for each other. They have a lot in common. I could tell that by the way it was written. It's about a wedding planner and a florist. The guy is a florist and the girl is a wedding planner. And I really liked that we got their passions and they were able to connect on that passion. They'd worked for each other in the past and had a little falling out, but they came back together. And I just love that we got to see them working with their passions and finding that connection with each other as well. So I really think they work for each other. I love that in romance books when we get characters who have more depth to them and you get to know them more with their hobbies and their interests. And it's not just a surface level, oh, these characters are attracted to each other and that's why they're together. I really appreciate Julie Soto's writing for that. So Not Another Love Song is about a cellist and a violinist. They have a passion with music and performing. And my God, Julie Soto can write a couple. She can write a good romance book. She's one of my favorite authors. I'll get to that in another question. But those 2 are fantastic couples. Recommend her books. Love them. Perfect. And then moving on, we have my favorite main characters. Number 1, we have Amma or Amma. I always forget how to pronounce her name. It's like the amaranth flower. Wait, I think Amaranth is a band. Is it Amaranthine? Is that the band? No, that's a song. Guys, whatever the flower is. maybe the flower and the band name is the same. But she's one of my favorite characters because of the way that I connected with her viewpoint on relationships. She doesn't really see herself getting married. She can't picture it. Neither can I for myself. So I just really connected with her on that. The romance and the type of romance and the viewpoint on the relationships in that book were something that you don't normally see in romance books. And I like that a lot too. So that's just why she's one of my favorite characters. I also have Sasha from One for My Enemy. She was kind of a secondary main character. Her sister was the main character, but we got Sasha's viewpoint as well. And I absolutely loved her character growth. She went from being the youngest sibling, which I'm the youngest sibling as well, so I have my older siblings that'll do the duties for me. She, as a young sibling, kind of feels a little held back. Her character growth was amazing, and she ended up being such this fearless baddie girl, and I absolutely loved it. Lastly, for this question, I have another girl. Go women, woo, female power. I have Mia from Nevernight by J. Kristoff. I don't really need to explain this one. If you read this book, you know. She's an assassin, and I love her. That's all I'm going to say for her. We have my new favorite authors that I discovered this year. And I always love this question and thinking about new authors that are my favorites because I love discovering authors that I love and their writing because then I know that I have so many more books that I want to read. First up, I have Frederick Bachman. I read Anxious People by him. This is the only book that I've read by him. I want to read Beartown next. It was on my winter TBR, and that will be the next book I pick up by him. I just really like him. I've watched some of his interviews, and he seems like a great person. I love his topics in his books and his themes and what he's able to give to a story. He connected Anxious People so well, and he's fantastic. So I am so excited to read more books by Frederick Bachman. Next up, just talked about him, I have J. Kristoff. Not only is he my new favorite author, because I love Nevernight, which I will be reading the rest of this trilogy soon. I have the second book. I want to read the second book by the end of this year. And actually, side note, I apparently have read books by him. I don't know if you can see them on my shelves. They're over here. You might be able to see a little slice of them. It's Illuminate and Gemina. He co-wrote that with Amy Kaufman. I read those books years ago, and I forgot that he's one of the authors of that series. But if we're talking about just him writing a book, The Nevernight Chronicles, absolutely love that book. Loved his writing. He can build a fantasy world so well. His characters are fantastic. He knows what he's doing. And I also want to bring up the fact that I found out that he listens to the same music as me, which makes him 100 times cooler, and that just brought him to the top completely for me. Anybody who also listens to metal music is such a cool person. J. Kristoff, shout out to you. Okay, and then of course we have Elizabeth Lim, Six Crimson Cranes. We talked about the book first question, but I also have read more by her, and she has a book coming out next year that I actually pre-ordered a signed copy. It's getting personalized to me. My name's gonna be in it. I'm so excited. I've never done that before. It looks beautiful. It's gonna be hardcover, gold edges. I'm so stoked. But I love the worlds that she writes, and they're so fun. She's awesome. Definitely read Elizabeth Lim if you haven't yet. Lastly, for this question, I've already talked about this author as well, Julie Soto. Like I mentioned before, the way she can write a romance, the way she puts character passions into the romance and hobbies and interests, love that. I'm always looking for that in a romance read. She actually has her first fantasy coming out and a YA thriller coming out next year. So she's diving into other genres. Very stoked to see how she can pull that off. Next question, we're gonna go back to a little bit of disappointments. This is an author that did not work for me, that was new to me this year. Unfortunately, this was Tracy Wolff. She wrote the Crave series. I read book 1 and 2, Crave and Crush. It's a young adult fantasy romance with vampires and werewolves and all those creatures. Academy setting, so very fun. I was entertained by the first book, and the second book was rough for me to get through just because of I felt like it was just way too long and I wasn't connecting with it. So I won't be continuing this series. It is young adult, so I just also can't connect with it in that way because it's a young adult that is more on the cringier young adult side and not the more mature young adult side. And I just don't feel like I can read them at my age at this point. I will say if you are younger, I would recommend them. They seem very entertaining, and if you like the characters, I think you're gonna love the series because you spend a lot of time with the characters, but just wasn't for me. And I don't think that I'd pick up any other books by said author. Now I don't even want to talk about this next question. This is the saddest book, but every time I think about this book in this trilogy, I tear up. I'm literally doing it right now. It takes 1 second for me to think about this book and it makes me emotional. This is the bro, I'm being so dramatic. I wish I had my reaction in a reading vlog. God, this book wrecked me so much. This is The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. It's the last book in the Poppy War trilogy, but this whole trilogy destroyed me, and I finished The Burning God. I had to reread the last chapter because I was like, there's no way. There's no way that this just happened. I closed the book and I stared at the wall. I literally stared at the wall because I could not accept the fact that the book ended that way. Whew. It made sense and it worked for what it needed to. Oh my god. I'm just so sad. Anyway, I also read Babel by this author. I felt the same way. So R.F. Kuang is just gonna rip your heart out and destroy you, but her books are absolutely fantastic. If you have not read R.F. Kuang yet, please make it a priority. Read the Poppy War trilogy or Babel or anything. I've only read those books by her. I need to read Yellowface, which that's a book that I'm reading next year. As soon as it comes out in paperback, I'm grabbing that. And then she also has a new book coming out in August. Just read her, please. Moving on to a lighter note, I'm gonna stop tearing up right now. My favorite covers. I love this because I love the art of a book cover. I love looking at book covers. I love just seeing how they go with the story. It's one of my favorite things about books. So of course I have Six Crimson Cranes. It's beautiful. I love the colors. The girl is absolutely beautiful. It just goes together so well. This is quite honestly one of the most perfect covers I've ever seen in my entire life. Next up, we have When the Moon Hatched. This cover just has all my favorite colors. I love a blue, a black, a white, and gray color scheme. The dragons are beautiful. There's a little like glow to it, or sparkly glow to it that I love. And I honestly am so impatient for the cover of the next book. I don't know why I'm feeling like it's gonna be red, but I'm just gonna put that out there. If I'm right, that's gonna be sweet. If I'm wrong, forget I said that. The last one I'm gonna pick for this is One for My Enemy by Olivia Blake. I just read this book and I absolutely loved it. I love the sword. I love the roses. I have a tattoo like this, so obviously you know that I love a sword and a rose, or a dagger, whatever. I'm looking at it right now. Just the white, the red, and black. That's another one of my favorite color combinations. Red, white, and black, especially for a fantasy novel. I just think this cover is done so well, and it has a little pearly glow to this as well, and I love it so much. Next up, we have a book that I haven't stopped thinking about. So I'm just gonna first off say the Poppy War trilogy. I don't need to explain that anymore, but the individual book that I haven't been able to stop thinking about is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I truly think that Kai and Peyton are so perfect. I love them too so much, so I cannot stop thinking about them. And there's one thing that I really can't stop thinking about. There was a scene where Kai, like, Peyton's on the ground or something, and Kai lifts her chin up and he says, "Look at me, Pay." Oh my god. When I tell you, I think about that line all the time and I'm just picturing it in my head. I love it so much, more than anything. I don't know why it does what it does to me. The fact that he calls her Pay as well, I don't like nicknames in books. They gross me out. But if it's a nickname that makes sense like that, it's just her name shortened. Kai saying it, leave me alone. Leave me alone. Lastly, for questions before we go into my goal wrap up, I have books that I wish I had gotten to. Now, I have 3 books right here next to me. I'm going to show them to you. I know I've just been like putting pictures on the screen, but I will actually hold these books in my hands. Why? I don't know. To change it up a bit, I guess. First up, I have Heavenly Bodies by Amani Uriu. This book I've heard fantastic things about. There is a second book as well. This is the indie published, and it's actually, I don't know what day in December, but this is coming out traditionally published. I'm probably going to pick it up just because this is going to be a trilogy, and the third book is never going to come out in the indie published covers, and I don't have the second book either, so they're not going to match on my shelves. If I love this book, I will keep this edition, but I'm definitely excited to pick up this book and read it hopefully in the beginning of next year. But I believe this is like an astrological fantasy romance. This is a book that I don't want to know too much about going into, but I've heard great things from Rachel from Raven-Haired Reader. She's the one that put this book on my TBR, made me pick it up. I'm very excited to see if I like this book, but I am not going to get to it this year. I will push it off until next year, but it's one of my priorities. Next up, this one was on my fall TBR. This is True Colors by Kristen Hanna. I've never read a Kristen Hanna, and this is the first book that I want to read by her. I discovered this book from Brie. She had a video where she had never read a Kristen Hanna either, but she was looking into Kristen Hanna's backlist, and she wanted to pick a book from there, and she picked this one. It's about sisters and this family. They grow up on, I believe, the seaside in California, or the ocean side. They're on a horse ranch, and they just go through their struggles and stuff. I know I'm gonna love this probably, and I'm excited for this to be my first read from Kristen Hanna. Just something that I'm not gonna get to this year. I will push it off maybe towards the summertime since it's set in the summer. We'll see. And then I have Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I've had this book since last year, and I wish I would have read it in 2023, but I think as time goes on, I'm actually happy that I'm waiting to read this book just because it's gonna take a lot of brain power. I know there's a lot in this book that is confusing to a lot of people, so you really have to focus, and I'm excited to do that. I'm excited to take my time with this book, but this is like a dark academia. Our main character is in Yale. She doesn't really know how she got a full ride scholarship to Yale. She was a survivor of a homicide, so a lot of crazy stuff going on. There's a lot of secret societies in here. Very excited to get into this. I now own the second book. This is going to be a trilogy. We have no news of when the third book is going to come out, I believe, so we'll see. But I do want to take my time with these books, and I don't mind waiting until next year. I know that I've had this for a while. It's a book that I know I will get to eventually, so I don't feel bad about keeping it on my TBR for just a little longer. Besides those 3, I do have books down here. I don't know if you can see the top of this stack. I was like, I can see my finger a little bit. I don't know what's blocking it. It's my chair. Also, side note, I discovered that this chair has a pocket on the side. I never knew that. I was looking at it last night from my bed, and I saw the pocket, and I was like, oh, that's sweet. This side doesn't have one, I don't think. Anyway, I have a stack of books down there. I am trying to meet my Goodreads goal. The books that I picked out to read to meet my Goodreads goal at the end of the year, I think I'm going to do a video on me attempting to meet my Goodreads goal, so you guys will see all of those books in a video. But I picked out books that I wish that I had gotten to this year, or that I wish I had gotten to earlier in the year. Those can technically be the answer to this question too, but I do plan on reading them before the end of the year. But if something happens and I can't get to all of them, just know that all those books were books that I want to read before the end of the year. Moving on to my Goodreads goal. I set a goal to read 120 books this year. Last year it was 105. I think I read 110. I opted to 120. I was like, I'm gonna read a lot this year, and I think I can do it. I'm at 110 right now, hence why I want to do a meeting my Goodreads goal after Bookmas is done. That's the video I'm going to focus on. That might be my only other video besides my Bookmas videos that you'll get this year. So I'm feeling good about the books I read this year. Of course, as time goes on, I'm really liking that I'm discovering more books that I like. I'm getting a better idea of my reading taste and what books I want to read in the future. And then with that being said, we're going to go into my 2025 goals. Number wise of books I want to read, I don't think I'm going to set anything too specific. If I stay on Goodreads, I think I'm just going to set it at 50 just because it's fun to have a reading goal set, but I don't want to read a certain amount of books. I do want to either create a Fable account or a Storygraph, maybe even both. If you have either of those and you suggest one or the other, please let me know. I know a lot of people have switched to one of those instead of Goodreads, and I definitely want to try to get off of Goodreads just because I've heard so many great things about the other apps. So one of my goals is to create one of those accounts. Another goal, I don't want to have a set number of books that I want to read each month. I just want to completely mood read besides videos, and I want to take more time with reading books because this year I set my goal of 120, and I'm gonna meet my goal if I set a goal. Obviously there's books that I DNF'd, so technically I haven't fully read 110 books this year. We're at like 105, but I still attempted them. But with my goal being 120, I had to read an average of 10 books a month, and I just don't want to do that next year because that is a lot. And while I love reading, I want to take more time with books and read slower, so I don't want to make it a goal to read a lot. I just want to do what feels right and read what feels right. And another one of my goals, I don't want to annotate as much as I used to, which I've been doing that this year already. The first half of the year, I would pick out a book and I would pick out my tabs, match the colors to the cover of the book. I'd pick out a highlighter, I'd have my pen with me, and I would annotate. There are books that I started annotating and I was writing in that I ended up not liking. I don't like the fact that I've spent time underlining things in books and writing in my books, and it's been a book that I haven't loved, and I've just ended up getting rid of it anyway. I do like annotating sometimes, and I love underlining books if it has a lot of quotes that I like in there. So I'm going to be very picky about what I want to annotate. I don't want to completely stop, but I'm definitely going to be more stubborn on what books I will be annotating. Another one was to finish series that I'm in the middle of. I definitely want to focus on getting through series towards the beginning of this year. I feel like this year I kind of spaced out series too much, and I would like to read them a little closer together. Obviously, I don't want to buy a full series before I've read the first book. I do like picking them up one after the other, but I don't want to spend too much time in between just because I may forget specific details, or I just feel a little disconnected from that world at that point. So I want to focus on finishing series that I'm in the middle of and make that my priority for the beginning of the year. I also want to keep my physical TBR around 30 or under 30. I've been doing good on that the last few months. I think that's something that I can keep up with. So that's going good so far. We're already getting a head start on that goal. And then I also want to go back into a bookstore, not really having any books in mind. I want to be caught up on the books I want to read so that I can go to the bookstore and just browse, look at books that I've never seen before, read the synopsis, and if it's something that I like, I'll buy it and try it out. This year I spent a lot of time reading books that other people have read. While that's so fun because you can talk about them, I really want to go back to my roots like I did when I was younger and just go into a bookstore and search for books that I think I might enjoy that I've never heard any reviews on. That way I can recommend them to you guys if you haven't heard of them either, now that I have a channel. I think it'll be super fun. I don't think I have too many other goals. I do want to reread books as well. I'm not a rereader just because there's so many books that I want to read for the first time, but next year I do want to reread the Mortal Instruments series and get through the whole Shadowhunter universe because I haven't read the other trilogies. And then I also want to reread some of my 5-star reads that I read a while ago. One of them is The Night Circus, another one is The Book Thief. I say The Book Thief is my favorite book of all time, so I want to reread that book and see if I still feel that way. Off the top of my head, those are the main books that I want to reread. I'm sure I'll find some more. I reread The Outsiders a lot. I would like to reread that book again. I think as you get older, it's nice to reread books too, because you miss a lot of things in books when you were younger because you haven't had that much life experience, or you may not understand things the way that the book is written for you to understand. Rereading classics as you get older is something that everybody should do. But yeah, I feel like I've rambled a lot. Holy crap, I'm gonna go now. But I just want to say I've had a wonderful time in 2024. I want to thank you guys for being here. I love reading and I love talking about books. I love sharing that with all of you guys. So thank you for being here and supporting my channel and even taking the time out of your day to watch a little bit of my videos. It means the world to me. I've always wanted to have a YouTube channel. I'm very excited to continue this journey. Shout out to you guys for being here. I will see you in my next video. I hope you have a great day or great night wherever you are, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.